Three, two, one. Welcome one and all to Hex. I'm Zachary Chelcom, also known as Hex Player Zaki, and thanks for tuning into my channel. Today we're looking a little bit at Hex, and we're going to be doing a deck tech. I'm not going to do a tournament. This is the first time I'm doing the video, but a little bit of a deck tech, kind of like if people have seen Rogue Deck Builder for Magic the Gathering. And I'll explain a little bit of how Hex works and whatnot. I'm by all means not the best player, I could say that, but I have experience from Magic, which this game plays very, very similar to Magic. So if you like Magic but wanted an online way to play it, you could get Hex, which is currently in an alpha. You'd have to get an alpha key, which you can if you go to hextcg.com. You can go to I believe support, and I'll have a little thing on the screen showing all that, where you need to go, and you can get a package to get into the alpha, but the open beta for it should be coming in a few months. So if you really like what you see, tune into the channel, see some stuff, see how the metagame evolves. Because there are so few people, it's either very stagnant for a little bit, or changes all of the time. It just depends on how people win and whatnot. And there aren't really there isn't that many people that can actively play for it, so it doesn't change all that much at times. Anyway, today I'm going to be explaining a little bit onto how it works, just to get people familiarized. Going to be using some Magic the Gathering terms, because that's the largest thing that people usually know, but I might use other things from other games, such as Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Pokemon, since they can have fairly similar effects too. First thing, I call this deck Crash Its Rhinos. Goes around this card, Crash of Beasts, as its main linchpin. It's a green card, or what it's called in this game is a wild card. There are 5 different kinds of colors or shards in this game that all the cards fall into, unless they're artifact cards, which are these ones at the top, which are all colorless. That each one needs a certain threshold. So if I would bring up this card, threshold is determined here, its cost is determined here. So it's not like Magic, where it's like this is the colorless cost and this is the cost of colors. This is a 3 cost card, but you require 2 wild threshold. To get wild threshold, you need to play shard cards. So for example, this wild shard gives you 1 wild threshold, which is this green, and gives you a charge. The charge is affected to your champion. Champions are like extra avatars that actually have special abilities. Currently, Running Deer, which is the one that I'm using with this, has the ability when you have 1 wild threshold and he has 4 charges, you can gain 5 life. It is a basic action, which I think all of the champions are basic actions currently. Yeah, it looks like it. A basic action, unlike Magic, which has sorceries and instants, one thing that I really liked about this is that it has just actions. And the actions can either be basic or quick. So if you need to refer to something being affected by when you would cast a spell that would be an instant or sorcery, like in Magic, instead you can just refer to it as when somebody casts an action. It cleans up wording a lot. And also, you know what an action is, and then if it has the quick modifier, then you can play it any time. Which works a lot better than trying to explain, well, a sorcery can only be played on your time, and an instant can be played whenever. Stuff like that. So that's how those are done. So, for example, this guy, you have to be played in mostly a mono wild deck, because he is 6 cost but also has 6 wild threshold, which means he's going to be really hard to cast. But he has Crush, which is effectively what Trample is, and Invincible, which is what Indestructible is. He can still be exiled, but he also has the text to he has to be attack each turn. And this game is a little bit buggy sometimes, so you saw that thing flew up all the time, or is on there for a long time. Otherwise, there aren't dual lands or shards yet. We presume that there'll probably be more in the future. But currently, if you have dual resources, like this is a wild Sapphire deck, Sapphire being mostly blue archetype, you have Shards of Fate, which you play it, you get 1 resource, which is kind of like your mana, so you get 1 resource increase, but not a resource for this turn. And then you get to choose a threshold out of your deck that you have. So you can't randomly just pick a red one, a ruby threshold, to get this from it. You have to have a ruby shard in your deck. So if somebody would mill it out, which is actually a fairly popular strategy right now, that can be it. But I have a couple decks that I just splash. I have like 2 of them in, and then I have Shards of Fate, and I only need 1 threshold, so I just need to get 1 of those to get it. To go over quickly the quote-unquote colors of Hex, you have Wild, which is kind of like green. It has some archetype things that aren't green, which I kind of like them doing, and since this is the only first set, they have a lot of room to expand. You have Blood, which is very much like black. Diamond, which is kind of like white. It branches a lot farther than the other one. Ruby, almost exactly like red. Very aggressive, very burn heavy. And blue, or shard, which is very much like blue. Or sapphire, not shard. But anyway, this is a sapphire wild deck that, as I said before, centers mostly around Crash of the Beasts, which has this tooltip on it called Escalation, which is one of the many things that you can do in an online MMO card game rather than on paper, where you have something like Escalation that when you play this card, you play it and then you shuffle it back into your deck and add 1 to the bold number. This bold number is 1 Rhino. So when the first time you play this card, you make a 3/3 with Crash for 3, which is pretty good in itself. The next time you would play one of these cards, you would make 2 for 3, and then you would play 3 for 3, and so on. It's supposed to get out of hand very quickly. To find those cards, we have Oracle Song, which is basically like Divination. Target champion draws 2 cards, which is different because you can target a different champion. So if you want to mill them out by making them draw cards, that's one. Peak, which you look at the top cards based on how much sapphire you have, how much sapphire threshold you have. You pick one of them and then put the rest of them in your deck, which is very handy if you're looking for something. Which divination or the threshold things basically can work a lot like devotion in the newest set for Magic, but they can start doing it now and works a lot differently, other than the fact that it's just based on how many resources you've played rather than stuff you have on the board, permanents that you have on the board. Otherwise, we have Howling Brave, which is basically Llanowar Elves. When it enters in, you get a wild threshold. So it can help you ramp up to, say, Fist of Bogan, or Bigodon. And then you can tap it to gain 1 resource for this turn. We also have Munaru Sensei, which, when he comes in, you draw a card, which can be very handy when you're looking for stuff. And then, as another kicker kind of at the end, other than Fist of Bigodon, is Jadim, which whenever you play a non-resource card, he gets a permanent XX, where X is the cost. And that's another thing you can do in this game that you can't do on paper card games. He gets permanent XX, which means it permanently affects his attack and his defense, regardless if he was killed, regardless if he's bounced back to your hand or put in your deck. He keeps those. Once he's been on there, he keeps those, unless a card effect such as, see if I can do this without bugging this out. Get rid of the artifacts. Where is Revert? There's currently one Reversion. Revert target card. That means all of the effects that it had when coming in, or since coming in, are reversed. So if it's been transformed, if it's been given permanent increase, those will all go away. That's the only thing. But then you have other stuff like Inner Conflict, which is slightly better than, say, Pacifism. It just makes it so it can't attack or block, but it gains it permanently, which means if you kill it, they can't resummon it, and it still can't attack or block. Or if you bounce it back to their hand, it doesn't get that. Another reason why you have Counter Magic, which will give all your cards that share the same name from all of their zones 2 extra cost, permanently, unless something would revert it. Continuing on with the deck tech, other things we have Chlorophilia, which will give you 2 Wild Threshold and 2 extra resources for the next turn. Chaos Key, which I have 2 of. I have a couple more in the reserves or the sideboard, which is you pay 2 to put it on the field, but then you can pay 5 to void it and void another card. So it's kind of like Oblivion Ring. Battle de Vitae. You 1 on the board, but then you can pay 2 and sacrifice it to gain 1 life, 1 charge, and draw 1 card. It's more there for the draw a card, but you can also help charge up champion, and running gear is kind of quintessential because you have a lot of bigger cards. Gaining the 5 life helps you keep on point. Lastly, we have Chimes of the Zodiac, which I threw in. I think there's been a couple other decks that have tried to use Crash of the Beast. I'm just throwing this in because it can get really ridiculous. It's a 7-drop artifact, but when you play an action, you copy it, which I have found through testing. It's really, really good. Gives you 4 cards, gives you 2 things to peek at, gives you a bunch of counter magic. Chlorophilia gets ridiculous. Crash of Beasts gets ridiculous because then it copies it first. Increase the escalation. When you play the actual card, you then play it for the increased escalation, and then you shuffle it into your deck. Otherwise, I think that's it, and we will move on to some games after this. Stay tuned for that.